Congratulations on dressing so in such
I
a
knew
dapper
that.
fashion.
It's only appropriate. I have to look like a gentleman. You know?
Yes.
Now, I can't be specific about the heroes and zeros, but our protagonist is a hungry animal. Our antagonist has indirectly started a war.
I had such a good time seeing this movie. It took so many turns and was so stylistic. I really had a good time. Matthew, your character in particular took me a lot of places. There were a lot of layers. He's very multifaceted. How was the process for you? What did you discover as you were filming about him?
I felt like I had a good line on who he was, what he wanted, what he was trying to do going into it. I think the main thing that I didn't know was going to happen was how much you change things, how much you have to adapt on the day if you choose to play with Guy's rewriting of scenes, which he does heavily, which at first was extremely frustrating for me. I'm like, oh, yeah. I've been working on this for, but then all of a sudden it clicks and you go, actually what he's coming up with is better. So I'm going to be game. And so then there's an agility that I learned to bring every day, to an extent more so than I've ever done with any other film. But also this type of film allows for it. It is a musicality. It's part of the style you're talking about. His dialogue is very precise. He has very precise opinions on what that is. There's a meter that Guy's listening for. And yes, he's written it, but he doesn't know what that meter sounds like until the actors. It's coming out of our mouths and going back and forth.
You gentlemen have both worked with the director, Guy Ritchie, before. I was wondering what makes him such a great collaborator?
His willingness to collaborate. He really is very open to the process. You know, he has the Guy Ritchie prism with which everything has to sort of go through, but I've found he has a tendency to give all the people he hires, not just the actors, but cinematographer and production design and costume designers, everything, certain level of autonomy and expectation that you're gonna show up and do your job without being babysat, you know, which, you know, definitely inspires you to do your best work.
Well, no, I think that's right. And I have found, the older I get, that the better directors, the best directors, are more like that. It's extraordinary. They barely seem to have a script, and they have very few expectations at the beginning of the day of, I want it to be like this. They get really good at, what am I getting? What am I getting, and do I like it? And altering it on the spot, directing on the hoof.
That doesn't feel like it to you at the moment. Out of the fucking way you came in, you cunt! Is it one of those? Sure, could be.
Another thing that stood out to me was the ample use of the C word in this movie.
Because you're not going out the way you came in, you deluded duck-eating cunt.
There's C-bombs left and right. I was wondering, as actors, like, what was your relationship to just, like, every day dropping C-bombs?
I thought it was quite kind of, I don't know, therapeutic in a sense.
It's fun.
You don't often get to sort of scream with venom.
That word.
Those types of sort of words.
Or even throw it off as a side-handed joke and throw it away. Yeah. And then, you know, as you know, America has a very different relationship with that word than Britain.
Yeah, it did infect the rest of my life. My young children say almost nothing else now.
You know, it's an Englishman's prerogative to drop the C-bomb. So we were making a film about good English gentlemen, so we'd be remiss not to.
But it's a much, much more frowned upon word here in America, I think. So I dread to think what that's going to do to this film.
Well, I think it puts you in the setting that you're supposed to be in, like you said. Hugh, I was wondering, you've played so many like really lovable characters throughout your career. There's been a lot of good guys. Is it enjoyable to flex those kind of like bad boy muscles in projects like this and be someone a little more shiesty?
Well, I think the character I play in this film is rather lovable. I loved him. I'm sad that no one else does.
I want you to play a game with me, Ray.
I don't want to play a game.
Oh, please.
No.
I said play a game with me, Raymond.
Right.
Lovely.
He lives in the morally grey.
I know what you mean. He's appalling. He's an absolute... Yeah, he's sleazy and disgusting. Yeah, it is cathartic. Anyone would say that. You'd say that. It's more fun playing baddies, isn't it?
Yep.
And easier.
You're too smart to be blackmailing us, Fletcher.
These people are going to clean house, and you are part of that house.
Henry, we've been seeing you in a lot of movies where you're super nice and charming. What was it? Was it exciting to kind of flex a different muscle and be kind of like shisty and terrible?
Yeah, this was definitely a departure of. It's funny because I was filming at the same time last Christmas. So one day I'd be on the streets of London, prancing around, kind of falling in love with Emilia Clarke, and then the next stage sat opposite Matthew here and just like throwing daggers at each other in like such an intense scene. So having to switch from those two characters throughout pretty much October and November we were filming, it was amazing. It was really sort of the ability to inhabit such polarizing characters during a small kind of time frame kind of allows you that sort of flexibility. You become attuned to it. And so it was a joy sort of like waking up and they're like, what? Who am I today? You know what I mean? And sometimes I would start reading sort of my script for Last Christmas in the dry eye kind of voice. I don't know if you ever do that. You sort of start adding a couple C-bombs. It's weird. The more sort of swear words that were coming out of my mouth, it was just putting me into that dry eye kind of state.
Did you keep it quite separate? Like, were you learning lines on?
I was learning at the same time, but it was just switching. And it was weird because my wife would come into the room as I was reading the different scripts, and she would know what script I was reading because just the atmosphere in the room would be really dark and tense, and she'd come in and she'd be like, doo-doo-doo-doo. So you're like, he's reading dry eye, like, I'll leave him alone.
Was also very taken by how the violence in this movie was very random. Sometimes it's hilarious.
Please! Hurry for Huck, Conda for Huck. Please!
You know, it's explosive. How did that factor into your process, the fact knowing that these things were coming out of nowhere and you were going to hit the audience in the face?
That's one of the delights of Guy Ritchie's films. You know, we were saying it earlier, every character has a very clear identity, but if you're going to have many immovable forces where the plot has you intersect, something's got to give. It can happen with the jackknife. You know, it can happen immediately when you don't. It can happen in the middle of the most comedic scene. And I think that's part of the playfulness that Guy does well in a movie like this.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stuck out to me was how ultra stylized it was. I was wondering how cued into like the subtitles or the cue cards or the little the editing choices. Was that in the script? Were you aware of that during the process?
He told me it wasn't going to be like that.
Oh, really?
I said, are you doing all your whizzing about nonsense? And he said, no, we're doing it straight. It's doing it straight. We're going to have classical music. That was all rubbish, as it turned out. It's quite. You haven't seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
But it's quite stylized and sort of lock stockish.
Yeah, it's heightened, which is I found really enjoyable as an audience member.
Do you know what? I think part of that is that Guy works very, very closely and gives that sort of that thing we were talking about, an enormous amount of autonomy to Jimbo, his editor. And I think Jimbo, you know, sort of just gravitates towards that style of, you know, of filmmaking in the editing room. So, you know, probably a lot of it has to do with their collaboration. You know, because Guy said the same thing on the last two films I did with him, that it was going to be this grand departure and sort of an entry into very, very classic, sensible filmmaking. And it hasn't happened on both occasions, so.
There's only one rule in this fucking jungle. When the lion's hungry, he eats.